At their 10-year wedding anniversary dinner at the Meridian Hall on Adaeze Obi Street, Victoria Island, Lagos, Obinna Okafor pulled back the chair reserved for his wife of a decade, the chair with her name card on it, and gave it to another woman. Adaeze saw it from 8 feet away. She stopped walking. Her hands, which had been holding a small ivory clutch, went still at her sides. Her chin did not drop. Her eyes moved from the chair to his face, and they did not move again. She stood in a cream dress that cost nothing and fit like something that had been earned, and she looked at her husband, the way a woman looks at a thing she has already understood and is simply waiting for the world to catch up to. Some betrayals are not sudden. They are only the last step in a long walk a man has been taking in secret. Stay with me through every part of this story. And if no one has told you today, you are worth so much more than what they left you with. The hall held 63 guests that night. Colleagues of Obinna's from the construction firm, aunties who had danced at the wedding, 2 of his university friends and their wives, a photographer who had stopped raising his camera. They had all seen it. The woman now sitting in Adaeze's chair was called Serena. She wore emerald green, her posture saying she had already won, her eyes moving across the room like an inventory being taken. She crossed one leg over the other and did not remove her sunglasses indoors. She touched the name card, the one that said Adaeze, and set it face down on the side table without looking at it. A woman near the left side of the room pressed her hand over her mouth. Someone whispered. The photographer put his camera down entirely. Obinna stood at the head of the table. He had dressed carefully for this night. Navy suit, gold cufflinks, the particular confidence of a man performing for people he still needs to impress. He looked at Adaeze standing in the entrance and said, loudly enough for the first 3 tables to hear every word, I have been carrying this marriage like a man carrying a house on his back, and I am done pretending it is not heavy. I built everything in this room. My name is on every invitation, and I have decided who sits beside me going forward. He paused. He gestured once towards Serena without looking at her. Adaeze, there is an envelope for you with the coordinator. Sign what's inside and let tonight be dignified. Mama Funke, his mother, set down her glass and said into the silence, a man cannot bloom when the soil beside him gives nothing back. Subscribe if this story is making your chest tight. We go deep here. Adaeze breathed once through her nose. She walked forward, not toward him, toward the table. She picked up the name card that Serena had turned face down. She looked at her own name on it for one long moment. Then she set it back on the table, face up. She spoke one sentence, quietly, her voice carrying only as far as the nearest table needed it to. I have never once argued my price with you, Obinna. That ends tonight, but not the way you think. She turned. She walked toward the exit. She did not take the envelope. Outside on Adaeze Obi Street, in the thick Lagos night with its diesel smell, and its distant generators, and its heat that never fully lifts, Adaeze reached into the ivory clutch. Her fingers found it before her eyes did. She had reached for it 10,000 times in the dark. A bird, small, carved from a single piece of dark ebene wood, its wings slightly spread, its beak tilted upward. Worn smooth at the breast from years of being held, it weighed almost nothing and somehow more than that. Papa Chima had placed it in her palm the night she left for her first year at the University of Lagos, when she was 17 and trying very hard not to show him she was afraid. This bird, he had said, has never flown, but it has never stopped knowing it could. She had not understood it then. She understood it now. An older groundskeeper was sweeping the path outside the hall, working in slow, unhurried arcs despite the hour. He looked up at Adaeze standing in her cream dress in the yellow light of the entrance, holding a small carved bird in both hands, and he said, not with pity, but with the recognition of someone who has seen dignity under pressure before, Madam, you carry yourself like somebody's important daughter. She looked at him. A small, tired smile moved across her face. I am, she said. I just forgot to mention it. Across the road, in the shade of a flame tree heavy with evening, a dark car sat with its engine running, black, no plates visible from this distance, just present. Adaeze had seen a car like this before, the night she had sat alone in the Lagos University teaching hospital while Obinna was unreachable, and the morning she had stood outside the Zenith Bank branch on Broad Street. After signing documents she had been given only 20 minutes to read, always distant, always there, always leaving before she could wonder long enough. She held the wooden bird and looked at the car and said nothing. To understand why this night was always going to end this way, you have to understand where Adaeze came from. Not the marriage. Before that. Before his name was ever written in any chapter of her life. Adaeze Obi was known on Dyke Close in Surulere as a tailor. He kept a modest shop with a hand-painted sign, 2 sewing machines, and a glass case displaying sample buttons and thread in neat rows. His compound was swept before 5 every morning. He travelled to Aba, to Onitsha, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks, but he always came back. And when he came back, he always said the same thing. What did you hold on to while I was gone? His neighbours knew one version of Adaeze, a gentle tradesman, a quiet man who fixed things and asked for little. But the tailoring was not the whole of him. It never had been. When Adaeze was 10, a girl at her school told the whole class that Adaeze's father fixed other people's old clothes because he could not afford new ones for himself. Adaeze came home and would not speak through dinner. Adaeze set down his fork and waited. When she finally told him, he looked at her for a long time and then said, Adaeze, a woman who knows her worth does not argue her price. She does not explain the price. She does not defend the price. She simply does not lower it. He touched her face once. That girl in your class does not know the price of you. That is her poverty, not yours. She was 10. She did not fully understand it. But she folded it somewhere deep and never opened that particular wound again. She was 14 when the strange things began to make sense. Or rather, when she stopped pretending they were not strange. The year her father said nothing about school fees, and yet the receipt came marked, paid in full, Adaeze Obi Foundation. The year 2 men in plain clothes came and replaced the electrical wiring of their entire building on Dyke Close without anyone asking, and left no invoice. The year her secondary school principal called her father to say that Adaeze had been selected for a bursary she had never applied for, and Adaeze had listened and simply said, good, and hung up and asked her what she had learned that day. The night before she left for university, he had come to sit on the edge of her bed. He pressed the carved wooden bird into her hands. It was already old, already worn smooth at the breast. He said, one day the world will try to lock you out of everything you are. When it does, remember whose child you are. He smiled the smile that always carried more than a smile can hold. Then he stood and left the room. She wore the bird in the pocket of her suit jacket on her wedding day. Her father held her hands at the door of the church and said, soft and precise, I won't be in the front row, but I'll be closer than you think. I always have been. She had married Obinna, believing in the version of him that struggled honestly. The version that came to her apartment in Yaba with a notebook, full of plans and the particular humility of a man who had not yet decided he deserved more than he had. She had believed they would build together, and for 3 years they did. Then his firm got a contract. Then the contracts got larger. Then Serena entered his world through a procurement meeting, a dinner invitation, an opinion. Your wife is the ceiling, Obinna, not the floor. A man who is afraid will always find someone willing to tell him his fear is someone else's fault. Obinna found that in her. He stopped looking at Adaeze clearly the following morning. He did not lose his sight all at once. He simply began to prefer the dark. Mama Funka had her own language for what came next. Compliment insults delivered at Sunday lunches with surgical patients, each one wrapped in a smile that never reached her eyes. Adaeze absorbed them the way stone absorbs rain, silently, steadily, changed by none of it on the surface. She had paid Mama Funka's private hospital bill, N4.2 million, after Obinna's account came up short in February 2 years ago. She had done it anonymously, through a fund she maintained privately, because she did not want him to carry the shame of it. She had never mentioned it, not once. His silence at the table when his mother spoke had always been the loudest thing in the room. Back now, back to the anniversary, back to Adaeze Street. The corridor of the Meridian Hall was still buzzing, guests filtering out, voices low, phones emerging carefully, when a sound moved through the building that had no single source. A ripple, the kind of quiet that happens when something walks in that changes the weight of a room. Barrister Eze entered the hall from the rear service entrance, with 7 members of Adaeze's executive board behind him. He was 62, dark suit, silver at the temples. He did not hurry. He looked at no one but Adaeze. He walked past Obinna without acknowledgement, past Mama Funka, past Serena still in the chair. Every member of the Meridian Hall catering staff, 12 people, turned from their stations and stood still, not because they had been instructed to, because they recognized who had walked in. Barrister Eze stopped in front of Adaeze. He addressed her by her full name, not Okafor, not her married name, not the name on the invitations, by the name she had carried since birth. "Miss Adaeze Obi," he said. "Your father passed this morning, in his sleep. He left one instruction. Go and get my daughter today. Do not make her wait 1 more hour." He held out a letter. She took it. She did not open it there, but she pressed it against the carved wooden bird at her chest, and she stood in the middle of that hall while the tears came, steady, unhurried, honest. While 63 people watched a woman receive grief and inheritance in the same breath and refused to collapse under either. Obinna stepped forward. He said her name, once cracked in the middle. She turned her head toward the sound. She looked at him the way you look at a place. "You are leaving for the last time, full, complete, without malice." Then she turned back to Barrister Eze. To the crowd, it appeared that a stranger had called the wrong name, and she had checked, and it had not been hers. She spoke to Barrister Eze, calm, final. "Take me to Dyke Close, my father's house. Nowhere else tonight." Then she turned, not to Obinna, but to the room itself, to the 63 witnesses, and she said one sentence at a volume that required no performance. "The Obi Pharmaceutical Group will continue its operations under its rightful chairperson, effective this evening. The rest you will read in the morning papers." The Obi Pharmaceutical Group, 46 distribution subsidiaries across 11 African countries, logistics contracts with 6 federal health ministries, the company that had quietly supplied 80% of Lagos state's essential medicines. For the past 9 years, Serena removed her sunglasses. She was doing arithmetic. Mama Funka had pressed both hands to the armrests of her chair. Her face was the face of a woman who has spoken a great many words in her life and has just understood the cost of them. Sola's phone was recording, or had been recording. She had forgotten to check. Obinna stood in the hall long after the board members filed out, long after the catering staff returned to their stations, long after the last tail light of the lead vehicle disappeared onto Adaeze Street. He stood in the middle of the room where his name had been on every invitation, and he looked at the name card Adaeze had turned face up. Still there, still hers, still bearing a name he had never fully understood he was holding. There is a kind of wealth that does not announce itself, because it does not need permission from the people who fail to see it. Inside the car, moving through Lagos towards Surulere, she opened the letter. Papa Chima's handwriting was the same as it had always been, deliberate, tilted forward, the letters of her name, written the same way he had written it on every school receipt, every birthday card, every note folded into her lunch tin when she was 7 years old and the world was still small, enough for him to fill it. The paper smelled of the cedar drawer in his workshop on Dyke Close, the place where he kept only the things that mattered. She read. She found one line and she read it 4 more times. It was not about the company or the contracts or the 11 countries. It was about a 10-year-old girl who had been told she was worth less than she was, and a father who had looked at her across a dinner table and said, "A woman who knows her worth does not argue her price." He had signed it the way he signed everything. Papachima, your first and permanent home. The wooden bird was in her left hand. The letter was in her right. The second car in the convoy carried Barrister Ease, who was watching Lagos pass outside the window and thinking about a man he had served for 30 years. The quietest large man he had ever known. There is no announcement large enough for what some fathers build in silence. There is only the morning it is finally revealed, and the people who spent years underestimating the daughter, finally understanding the architecture. If this story found you today, it found you for a reason. Some of you are sitting with that right now, carrying something no one around you can see. Hold it. Wait. The door opens for you and nobody else. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We go deep every day. Drop a comment below. What did she do right that you wish someone in your life would do? And type where you're watching from. I read every single one.